it's Christy with the Chirp YouTube channel. Here we are again for another video in our Helping Kids Learn to Talk series. Today we're going to talk about something called the cloze procedure. Not close as in close the door, but cloze as in C-L-O-Z-E. This is something I learned about in graduate school and that immediately made light bulbs come on in my mind because it was so brilliant. One of the problems with our kids with developmental disorders and delays learning to verbally speak is that the pathway between their brain and their mouth isn't necessarily communicating effectively from the brain to the mouth. It's called a processing problem. Kids who have autism, for example, often also have another disorder which is called apraxia. And apraxia is the way that professionals describe that difficulty of sequencing the muscle movements that are going to make a particular movement happen. Apraxia of speech is when that difficulty happens relating to the speech muscles. Apraxia also happens with other body parts, which is one of the reasons why oftentimes kids with autism will walk a little bit differently, perhaps very stiff or perhaps a little bit floppy. There are lots of muscles that need to work together in the appropriate sequence in order to make movements happen. Now that we know that apraxia happens and a little bit about what that is, and by the way, I have a rather old video about that topic up there, but you might still find it helpful. Now that we have heard a little bit about apraxia, let's move on and talk about the fact that one of the ways to kickstart speaking or particular movements in people who have apraxia is through automatic speech. Automatic speech and singing come from a different area of the brain than speech that a person initiates independently. So for example, when I say 1, 2, that answer, if you shouted out 3, that answer came from the area in your brain which manages automatic speech. It did not come from the creative speech part of your brain. Of course, we want creative speech to be happening, but a good way to kickstart that is by working on making more words come out via automatic speech. We're not going to talk about singing today, but singing is another one of those processes that happens in another part of the brain, which is why often people who have had a stroke and their speech centers are damaged can still sing. Children, oftentimes their first words, children with autism specifically, oftentimes their first words will be in songs because it is coming from a different part of the brain that isn't struggling as much as the speech center is. This is also why people who stutter don't usually stutter when they're singing. We can use those skills to transition that automatic speech into the more creative, free-flowing speech. But we want to get it started, and so we want to use the procedure called the cloze procedure. The cloze procedure goes something like this. You use a phrase that is very well known, that the child knows very well, and you leave off the end. For example, Mary had a little. It kind of takes a lot of effort not to say that last part, doesn't it? Yes, it does. And that's why it will prompt kids who know the phrase to jump in. Their brain just takes over and says, lamb. And before they know it, oftentimes it has come out. It's amazing. I can't believe this works, but it really does. Not just for kids. If you are a teacher, or a therapist who's working with a family, you want to make sure that the family knows, or your other adults in your classroom know that you're going to be using this strategy. It happened to me far too often that I would be working with kids in the classroom and I would say, ready, set, and I would leave off the go because I wanted the kids to say go, and instead one of the paraprofessionals would shout out, go! That kind of defeats my purpose, but it is very difficult to hold yourself back, which is why this strategy works. What are some of the phrases that you can think of in your own life, in your child's life, where you have spoken that phrase enough times or read that book enough times, where you can say the first parts of it, ready, set, Mary had a little, old MacDonald had a, and you can make an expectant look on your face, and you can leave the end off so that your child can chime in and jumpstart the process of producing verbal speech. Thank you for being with me today. I hope you learned something new and that your brain is firing with all sorts of new ideas. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.